Closing up the shop on week 14. What's up, ladies and gentlemen, fellas? $1 million Rooskies up top to first place. And a divisional matchup, this showdown slate between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. I'm excited for this one. I'm excited now that we're going to be having Saturday football moving forward for the next 2 weeks. Yes, that is right. A 2-game slate for week 15, a 3-game slate the day after Christmas in week 16. Very excited to cover those. But we got to get through this 1-game showdown slate, as we always do. If you're brand new here, how you doing? I'm about to smack you with the information that you're about to get. The best information that you're going to find on these free YouTube streets, on the free podcast streets out there. We're going to go player by player. Anybody that's going to be potentially making an impact today. Anybody that's going to be running routes at the wide receiver tight end position. Anybody that might be touching the ball as a running back. We're going to be talking about them today. I'll be letting you know early on if I have any type of interest, a yes, a maybe interest, or just a no right on. And then later on tonight at 6 p.m. East Coast time, I'll be doing a 1-hour live stream where I'll have my 150 lineups, my final interest, answering all of your questions for an hour. So be sure to hit that notification bell so you know when we're going live. But also the like button for me, why not? The big old subscribe button, especially if you're brand new here. Join this community as we push towards 35,000 subscribers by the end of 2020. We are on pace to do so. So why not help us out and get there? I appreciate that in advance. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing here. And what you can do right now is sit back, relax, take your shoes off, or maybe you're at the gym, or maybe you're walking, or maybe you're doing whatever with your podcast in your ears, whatever it is. This is your time. We're about to fill your brain with the information to smack around your opponents, to win all the dollar rooskies and have the better potential to win those dollar rooskies than the people you'll be facing in head-to-heads, than the people you'll be facing in tournaments, in the betting streets, whatever it might be. One place that you can do that, and you can do it in a major way, is the sponsor and the proud presenting sponsor of this Monday Night Showdown show, and that's going to be SuperDraft, where SuperDraft continues to just be excelling, continues to just add more tournaments and more contests. And hint, some of these contests aren't filling. Yesterday, about 20 minutes before the game start, there's still 1,000 spots, almost 20% of, and really 25% of the contest field for their main event that has $20,000 to first on SuperDraft that was still open. So one, you're getting overlay. One, sometimes you're getting rate-free contests as well. You're getting weaker competition because people aren't focusing on SuperDraft. It's a multiplier format. So for example, if you are not familiar already, Lamar Jackson, if he scores 20 points tonight, he has a 1x multiplier. He will score 20 times that 1x and he gets 20 points. But for example, tonight, if Mr. Mark Ingram somehow scored 15 points tonight, he has a 2x multiplier. He would actually smash and outscore Lamar Jackson because he would actually finish with 30 SuperDraft points. I have all the multipliers and all of the projections for SuperDraft down below on Patreon, as well as a bunch of other stuff, so you can follow along and check that out. My name's Sal. SAL will give you a free money bonus up to $1,000 Rooskies if you just sign up on SuperDraft and try it out. People are winning every single day on SuperDraft. Had somebody else reach out to me on Twitter yesterday winning $4,000 on SuperDraft. We've had people win over $25,000. We've had people win over $10,000. It is the best chance that you have at return on investment in DFS because it is less competition and quite frankly, easier competition. You're playing less people for similar to more money per person in the contest, and those people are not as good, not using projections, not anywhere near as in tune with SuperDraft strategy. So check it out down below right now. Personally, myself ended up doubling up the money yesterday on SuperDraft. Was a very good day. Again, check it out down below. My name's Sal. Let's know that you came from me, S-A-L. So let's start this bad boy off, and we'll start it in terms of the salary order with Mr. Lamar Jackson, who's going to have a negative 42% pass blocking advantage against Cleveland's number 17 pass rush. He is throwing the ball just 27 times per game, but we know that he's running the ball a ton. He has now eclipsed Kyler Murray with the most rushing yards per game to this point with 60.8 per game, and now has 22 or more fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games, averaging 7 yards per attempt, right around to slightly below league average, and the number 19 protection rate on the season. Lamar Jackson is currently on Patreon. Again, you can follow down below on my projections, rankings, ownership will be out for tonight as well, and all the other main slates. A lot of information there, especially with NBA coming out, a lot more to come. He is my highest projected player on the slate by over 6 fantasy points is Lamar Jackson. He is expensive, but in my opinion, it is appropriate. He's going to start out this slate with a yes. And now we get to not the next quarterback on the slate, but actually Mr. Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb right now, based on how he's playing as of late, deserves this price point of being $10,000+. There is only 2 players above $10,000 on the slate, and one of them, yes, is Mr. Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is going to have a positive 20% matchup against Baltimore's number 17 run defense, and Cleveland right now ranks number 3 in run plays per game. He averages 17.6 opportunities per game. That'll be a little bit skewed downward because he left the game in Dallas week 4 where he only played like 18% of the snaps and then left early due to injury, but he has been fantastic. Honestly, if Nick Chubb never got hurt, he would be up there likely in the discussions with Dalvin Cook, likely in the discussions with Derrick Henry in terms of how good of a running back overall yardage, how efficient he has been, because he's number 2 in yards per touch, he's number 1 in true yards per carry, and number 3 in yards created amongst all running backs. There has only been one game this year, one full game that he has played, right? He left early in week 4 against Dallas, where he has not eclipsed 100 total yards. That was week 1 when he had 66 yards on just 10 carries, and everybody was screaming for the heavens that it was Kareem Hunt's backfield. Since then, 133 yards, 110, 126, 112, 176, and 106 total yards overall in fully healthy games since week 1. And he's been doing it lately on an enhanced workload. In his last game, he had 19 overall opportunities. He saw 5 red zone touches. The game before that, 22 overall opportunities, 4 red zone touches. Nick Chubb should be this price point. He should be this expensive. He deserves this price point. Although he's $10,200, he's going to project out pretty much right around all the other guys around him. He's not going to be a clear-cut yes for me, but this is a better matchup than you actually think. This is a bad Baltimore Ravens run defense and an even worse tackling unit. Nick Chubb has been fantastic, especially in an evaded tackles and creating your own yard standpoint. He's going to need touchdowns, so he's going to be in play for me. Not a full-on yes, because some of the guys around him look pretty similar, but he's definitely a strong in play for me type of a player. Next up is Nick Chubb's quarterback, and that is going to be Baker Mayfield, who as of late, the last couple of games, maybe the 2 best games, at least fantasy-wise, and probably in real life as well, on the season for Baker. He'll have a positive 7% pass blocking matchup against the Ravens, who have the 22nd ranked pass rush. He's averaging 27 attempts per game, very similar to Lamar. 33rd overall protection rate in the NFL this year for Baker Mayfield. It is a good line. It is a good line so far this year. It's a combination of holding onto the ball. It's gotten better over the last 2 games, so that's something to point out from the protection rate. 7.5 yards per attempt is above league average, but he's been good in a couple of regards. Baker is definitely in this contract year for you, really, in a year where they can just say, you know what, we don't want to pick up that 50-year option. Baker is number 3 in true completion percentage. Baker is number 4 in right now true passer rating. He's been strong. 18 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. At $10,000 flat, it is a tough secondary, but Jimmy Smith has been unhealthy and injured. We'll see what happens with his status tonight. Marlon Humphreys has been average but not elite after getting his big contract. Marcus Peters is having a down year for Marcus Peters standards. They don't have Earl Thomas. The secondary is nowhere near as good as last year, although it's similar players due to banged up play and just regression from peak performance. Baker Mayfield is in play for me. I might lean to get to Nick Chubb, to be completely honest with you, but since they're 3-point underdogs, it does skew towards maybe a little bit more passing plays than usual in this game. Next up, you have a player, and honestly, we can say this about Baker Mayfield as well, and maybe this is why Nick Chubb's performances as of late have been better. Before the last 2 games, they played in 3 terrible weather games, a monsoon, 2 wind games, where it was impossible to have a strong passing offense. So we can give them a little bit of a break there, and I kept harping that on a lot of my DFS shows and betting shows, and you know, if you were one of the fellas out there, shout out the t-shirt shop down below if you want to check out all the merch that we have, especially for the Christmas season. I ordered myself a couple. I'm hoping that they come maybe today or tomorrow. A couple of hoodies, a couple of t-shirts. Can't wait for them to come. The fellas ones are fantastic. But shout out to fellas if you've been paying attention to this because you were on Jarvis Landry. You might have even been on Baker Mayfield the last couple of weeks, but really the big one was Jarvis Landry. Because Jarvis Landry over the last 2 weeks, 16 receptions, 205 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 22 targets. And he had 9 red zone targets. Jarvis Landry in the last 2 weeks has seen 9 fucking red zone targets out of his 22 overall targets. That is absolutely insane and nuts. Now he's $9,400. He's insanely expensive, sadly for us, but in general, this slate is kind of priced off all over the place. He'll have a positive 5% matchup against Marlon Humphreys, who is allowing 1.07 yards per cover. So far, Jarvis this year, 6.5 targets per game on a 25% target share, 45% of his snaps out of the slot, and he is number 7 in the NFL in red zone targets. But here's the big thing about Jarvis Landry. Yes, it's because there was a 3-week span, plus a bye week was in there. So in total, 4 weeks, 1 month, where he just wasn't doing anything because he had a bye week and he had 3 bad weather games. And that was all without OBJ. We didn't really have a true sample of Jarvis Landry's role in this offense without OBJ until these last 2 weeks when they actually played in some decent weather. And now you've seen it in a major way. He's basically the only guy that Baker is looking at in the red zone. Austin Hooper, another red zone guy, the secondary guy, is likely not going to play tonight. So a huge red zone role is going to be there potentially for Jarvis Landry tonight. I would expect somewhere around 8 to 10 targets for Jarvis Landry. Right now, I'm going to be putting Jarvis Landry as a yes. The reason I put him as a yes is because I like the upside that wide receivers have more so than running backs more times than not. Running backs, especially Nick Chubb, who don't have a pass catching role all that much, can be factored out of this game if it goes sideways, whereas Jarvis Landry, for the most part, is not going to be factored out of that game. And if he is, it's because his team's up big, and it's likely because he's doing well. So Jarvis Landry at $9,400. I do understand that that is expensive, but I like the recent stuff we're seeing out of him. I'm not too terrified about this secondary yet, especially if Jimmy Smith is out. Give me a yes at $9,400 Jarvis Landry. Next up is Mark Andrews, who is set to return after being on the COVID list. He had diabetes, so it was a little bit scary, so they were taking their time with him. He'll have a positive 5% matchup against Malcolm Smith, who he does have a 31-pound advantage on, which is pretty massive if you're just talking about matchups, right? Not even skill-based. He just has a massive advantage on him as a tight end for an undersized linebacker. A 22% target share this year on 6 targets per game. He's seen 36% slot usage, and he's been pretty decent when it comes to air yards. The number 1 tight end in overall market share of his team's air yards. The problem is he's doing nothing after the catch. He's awful. He's number 31 out of all the tight ends in the NFL in yards after the catch. He's just been efficient on a per route basis, number 8 in yards per route run. So So here's what I'm going to do with Mark Andrews. Myself personally, as a 150 max player, a 20 max player tonight, I'm going to be having him in my player pool. I'm not going to be taking him out because even though he's overpriced for his role this year at $8,800, if he does see 7 targets, 50 yards, and a touchdown, right, and he catches 4 passes, that's going to be probably enough on this type of a slate, 15 fantasy points or so, to be getting you there at $8,800. So I'm not going to be taking him out because that's a very realistic stat line. If you're playing like 1 to 10 lineups, I'd probably put Mark Andrews as a no. So what I'm going to be putting these exposures as if you're just playing a couple lineups, because I know like 95% of you, maybe 99% of you tonight are just going to play like 1 to 10 lineups. So if that's the case, I probably would not be getting to too much Mark Andrews relative to the guys around him, like Jarvis Landry, relative to some of the guys a little bit cheaper than him, and really just skipping the 8K range as a whole. But if you're playing 150s, he's going to stay in my player pool because he'll be a decent option for you, especially because he has a lot of touchdown upside. Next up is J.K. Dobbins, who, look, this is not the same situation as Cam Akers, right? This is not the rookie running back late in the season that on a showdown slate is a little bit overpriced in the 8K range, $8,200 J.K. Dobbins, and is the number 1 back. Coming into what was like 2 to 3 weeks ago at this point, it looked like he was going to be the main workhorse back. It was a week where Mark Ingram was coming off an 8% snap share, Gus Edwards wasn't getting that much work, J.K. Dobbins was seeing like 20 opportunities himself, and then he got hit with COVID, right, for Thanksgiving week. And then he finally returned last week, and there's a couple things you could say from this. Maybe it was just easing him back in, right? Maybe it was the fact that they were up so big in the offensive side, so they let all the running backs get in play. But whatever it wasn't that encouraging for J.K. Dobbins' role, and it definitely wasn't encouraging enough for me to want to pay $8,200, right? He has a neutral 0% run blocking matchup against Cleveland's number 16 run defense, and in week 13 he returned 11 carries for 71 yards. He was very efficient, right? But he only ran 4 total routes, but it was a blowout win against the Cowboys where they can just run. This is the number 1 run offense, and the number 3 run offense is Cleveland. Number 1 is this Baltimore Ravens offense, so maybe lean the under in this game. But either way, this is the number 1 run offense, and they were able to run at will against the Cowboys, so why not keep doing that? So he didn't run many routes, but he only played 37% of the snaps. You did see 5 red zone touches, so almost half of his touches were in the red zone, which is good to see, but their just offense in general was in the red zone a lot. Because Gus Edwards had 7 carries for over 100 yards, J.K. Dobbins was averaging 7.7 yards per clip. Yeah, you're going to get to the end zone pretty quickly, or the red zone, when you're doing that. But it definitely was not encouraging to see J.K. Dobbins only play 37% of the snaps, and this to go back to a 3-headed backfield. Now, I'm not shocked to see if this just tilts back tonight to a situation where Dobbins is running 20 routes, he sees 4 targets, he catches a couple, and he gets 12 attempts. But at $8,200, I don't think that it's that much of a slam dunk play, or at least the chances are not as likely as what we just saw to Cam Akers, who's coming off of a game where he did see all the usage and was very good with that usage. Now you're coming off of a game where J.K. Dobbins, sure, was good with the limited usage, but so was to a much lesser extent Mark Ingram. Gus Edwards, 7 carries over 100 yards in that game. So I'm going to go no as well on J.K. Dobbins. And if I had to pick one, I would choose Mark Andrews over Dobbins in this 8K range for sure, in my opinion, for the upside of just a pass catcher downfield, the red zone usage, and not having to split up his usage at tight end position like Dobbins was as a running back. Now we start to get to some of these wide receivers, and Hollywood Brown at $7,400. It's a fair price point. Look, a positive 11% matchup against Johnson, who allows a 78% catch rate, and Hollywood Brown this year, 24% target share on 6 targets per game. You're getting 15% slot usage and top 5 deep attempts in the NFL, so there's always that upside at $7,400. I think it's a fair price point. You're getting 16 targets and 9 receptions over the last 2 games. Now, obviously, one of those games was with Robert Griffin, and shout out from Penn State, the alumni myself, just like you, Trace McSorley, taking us to that Big Ten championship, playing from behind, one of the best games I've ever seen. Saeed Blacknall, all these people, Saquon with the game winner on TJ Watt. What a game. But Hollywood Brown, he's going to be in a situation where, yes, okay, so 2 games ago, you can't really count that because it wasn't with Lamar, but coming off of a game where he plays 82% of the snaps, only needs to run 19 routes, and on those 19 routes, he ended up seeing 8 targets, 2 red zone targets, caught 5 of them as well, so there's upside for sure for him. It's nice to see that he's staying involved to this point. The problem is that this team likes to run a lot. They're 3-point favorites, so there's a really good chance that Lamar only throws 25 times in this game. So even with a 25% target share, you're still only looking at like 5 or 6 targets for Hollywood Brown. At $7,400, he's nowhere near a smash play for me, but he's going to be in play nonetheless. You get then to Kareem Hunt, the number 2 running back for the Cleveland Browns, and pretty firmly now the number 2 since Nick Chubb has returned. You will still see that same positive 20% matchup against Baltimore's number 17 run defense. In week 17, you saw the most touches he's seen since Nick Chubb was back, with 17 overall touches. But the problem was they had a huge lead against Tennessee, and they could just run the clock out a little bit more and have more running plays than they normally run. Now, 14 routes run per game, and the number 4 yards created running back, he still has upside to smash and to do something here. But if Nick Chubb does stay healthy, I'm probably, if you're playing like 1 to 3 lineups, I'm probably avoiding Kareem Hunt. It's very much so like right on that borderline. So I'll keep him in play just because he has the pass catching upside and they are going to be playing from behind. So maybe you do see a 3 or 4 reception game from him. He's going to be touchdown dependent though at $7,200. Don't like him at all on SuperDraft where he only has a 1.35x multiplier. At $7,200 on Draftkings, I would much prefer at this point just getting to Hollywood Brown's upside. Some more wide receivers now as we get over to Rashad Higgins, who will have a positive 13% matchup against Marcus Peters, who who is allowing 1.1 yards per cover this year, which is down from his last year metric. Still not bad, but just down from last year. It's tough to look at Higgins' overall year stats because obviously OBJ was on this team for a large majority of the season. 14% target share and 4 targets per game is tough to look at, but in week 13 you saw it. The bad weather was gone. In week 12 he struggled. In week 13 he popped off since Baker popped off. 6 catches on 9 targets, 95 yards and a tutty, and he's the number 2 wide receiver, very sneakily here, number 2 wide receiver in the NFL in yards per target, meaning downfield usage for big upside plays. 11.8 yards per target is very quietly an elite number. Rashad Higgins at $6,200. I would even prefer Higgins for $1,000 less than his teammate Kareem Hunt here, who would at least be operating tonight as the wide receiver 2 for the Cleveland Browns. Willie Snead at $5,800. This is a tough sell for me. He's coming back from COVID here. Look, Willie Snead has been good from a target share usage, so this will be interesting to see how much it's going to impact guys like Hollywood Brown, because yeah, Lamar has liked throwing to Willie Snead, especially in the red zone. He'll have a positive 17% matchup against Stewart, who allows 0.99 yards per cover. Willie Snead this year seeing a 15% target share on 4 targets per game, and he's playing 72% of his snaps out of the slot. But here's the big thing. Willie Snead, before getting COVID, 7 targets in 3 of his last 4 games to that point, and he was running 24 or more routes in 3 out of his last 4. Willie Snead was actually operating as the number 1 wide receiver on this team, and he was operating as the number 1 air yards player. He was seeing 85 air yards, 73 and 55 in 3 out of his last 4 games. He was actually the number 1 receiver over Hollywood Brown. So if you want to take that stuff into account, then at $5,800, he's a pretty cheap option for you. But even that all being said, he's been touchdown dependent this year. Outside of his game where he went for 100 yards against Pittsburgh, if he hasn't scored a touchdown in that game, you're not going to be even flirting with over 8 fantasy points. So at $5,800, he's a touchdown dependent wide receiver, and I don't really like that. So again, if you're somebody playing 1 to 10 lineups, I'm going to pass on Willie Snead. I'd rather go to guys like Rashad Higgins, who aren't touchdown dependent wide receivers, who have the downfield usage, who are seeing consistent air yards, who can catch 4 passes for 80 yards, 4 passes even for 72 yards, something like that, right? 70 yards, and end up getting you 10 plus fantasy points. Willie Snead, since his offense just doesn't throw that much in general, they're favorites here. It's really tough to rely on volume from him. Like even if you ended up seeing another 7 targets, his catch rate isn't that high. Say he brings in 4 of them, his average depth of target is nowhere near that high. You're probably looking at 4 catches for 40 yards. That's not going to pay off for you here. So again, if you're playing 150 max, he's probably in my player pool. If you're playing 1 to 10 lineups, I could avoid it and go somewhere else. Next up is going to be Gus Edwards, who was mega efficient last week, but saw a drop down in overall usage, obviously because you had J.K. Dobbins come back and Mark Ingram. But 7 carries overall for 101 yards. He's averaging 9.1 opportunities per game and 44.2 total yards per game. In week 13, his snaps did go down to 33%, but that's bad for J.K. Dobbins because this guy is still playing a third of the snaps to this point. He's averaging 4.5 yards per carry so far this season, which is 13th in the NFL. Very good to see, and 5 routes run per game. Gus Edwards at $5,200 is nowhere near what I want to be paying for on this slate. Yes, he sees red zone and goal line touches, so you can see a Gus Edwards stat line like you did on Thanksgiving or the week after Thanksgiving when they played, I believe it was Pittsburgh. You can see a stat line that says something like 8 carries for 12 yards and a touchdown or 2, but I'm not going to be going to Gus Edwards at this price point. A little bit too expensive for me. Donovan Peoples-Jones, the man who was one of the highest rated ever high school recruits, then he goes into a terrible program for his skill set in Michigan where they want to run the ball more, short passing, no good quarterbacks, can't take advantage of his skill set, and he drops to like the 6th or 7th round of the NFL draft this year. Now he's actually getting playing time without OBJ out there, a positive 17% matchup against Harris, if Harris is actually going to play. Otherwise, it's Jimmy Smith, which is a completely different matchup. It goes from being maybe the most difficult matchup in the NFL to what would be the easiest matchup on this week, according to yards per cover metrics. Harris, in a small sample size, has allowed the most yards per cover this season at 2.98. Again, if Jimmy Smith is in, this is probably a matchup against Jimmy Smith, nowhere near the same matchup, who is only allowing about 0.51 yards per cover this season. Now, in week 13, you saw a career high, 20 routes run, even in a blowout, 20 routes run for Donovan Peoples-Jones. He caught 2 of his 3 targets for 91 yards, and he had that big touchdown. At $4,800, he's going to be big play upside or bust. So I'll have interest in him because if he starts to become a little bit cheaper here and we're seeing the routes run go up, but that interest is not going to be all that high, especially if Jimmy Smith is in. Now you get to the defenses, you start to get down here to some cheaper players. Ravens defense at $4,400. It's a fair price point, but I think there's enough value on the slate that I can avoid it. They rank 20th overall. It's also not that good of a defense, to be honest with you. It's just kind of a name value at this point. Yes, they have some good cornerbacks that when it comes to fantasy scoring, yeah, the cornerbacks can have some pick sixes, but I'm not going to be slightly relying on that. I want to look more so for pressure. And when it comes to defenses in general, it is kind of random. You have the special teams component of return touchdowns, but I want to be looking for pressure and tackling and that type of stuff. They don't tackle well, so yards after the catch, picking up more yardage, scoring more points is going to hurt the defense. They don't bring any pressure at all, so that's a concern. They're ranked 20th in total defense, 17th versus run, 26th in tackling, 22nd in pressure, and 17th in coverage. I don't have any interest in this point in playing a defense on this slate and paying up for the more expensive one at $4,400. Now you get to Harrison Bryant, who, look, there's unlikely to be Austin Hooper. We'll touch on this for sure if he's inactive on the live stream tonight at 6 p.m. East Coast time. So again, like, subscribe. subscribe, notification bell, all those things. I greatly, greatly appreciate your support as we push towards 35,000 subscribers and 35,000 ladies, gentlemen, and fellas in this beautiful community that we're building. Another way to support as well, you can follow over on Twitter at SalVetriDFS, on Instagram, Sal_Vetri. Join those communities there, interact with that content, reach out if you have any questions, all that type of stuff. Check out those socials. But Harrison Bryant, yeah, look, he's been a good rookie tight end when he's gotten some usage. Hooper unlikely to play. He didn't see any targets though in week 13 when David Njoku did. I think that this is going to be very similar to when we had earlier in the year the appendicitis with Austin Hooper. You just saw some split usage. So with no Hooper in week 7 and 8, you saw Mr. Harrison Bryant catch 7 of 8 targets for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. He ran 14 routes and 20 routes. Now he'll have a tough matchup against Chuck Clark. I think this price point is overpriced, to be completely honest with you, but I won't rule him out because he will be using the red zone, especially since there's no Hooper tonight. It's going to probably be Bryant, Njoku, and Landry being the guys using the red zone. At $4,200 though, if I had to pick one of them, it would definitely be paying all the way down for Mr. Njoku. So I'll keep him in my player pools on like 150 maxes because of the touchdown upside. I'll slightly keep him in play, but I will let you know if I peek behind the curtain on Patreon. Follow down below for all my Patreon projections rankings so you have all the information you need and you're equipped to get into these contests and dominate tonight. I basically have Harrison Bryant and David Njoku projecting out for the same points, but their price points are wildly off, over $3,000 difference for their price points. I think their routes run are both going to be around like 15 here. So if you had to pick one of them, and let's just do it this way. I'll keep Harrison Bryant into my 150 maxes, but if you're playing, let's just say 1 to 3 lineups tonight, I'll be going with David Njoku over Harrison Bryant. They basically look like the same player for me tonight, except there's a 3,000 plus difference. So it's just an easy fade if you're playing only a couple lineups on Mr. Harrison Bryant. Let us scroll down now as we get to the final names on this slate, and you can start with the Browns defense. Browns defense at $4,000. It's fine. If you wanted to play a defense, just choose the cheaper one. These defenses look very similar. The Browns are 18th overall, 16th first to run, 11th in tackling, 17th in pass rush, and 20th in coverage. They're very similar. They have a little bit better of a pass rush than the Ravens. I don't really care too much as underdogs to be getting there, to be honest with you. I don't really care to be getting to defenses on this slate, but again, I'll have ownership to the defenses. You'll see that later tonight, but again, if you're building a couple lineups, probably won't. Both kickers are going to be in play. As usual, kickers are fine to get to if you really want to. I also call out, go ahead, sign up for Super Draft. Go ahead and make your Dollarooskies. The kickers are very much in play on Super Draft week in and week out. If I rank this right now by my Super Draft points overall, these kickers are actually going to come in, right around like, there's 2 guys who kind of stand out on Super Draft. Link down below to check it out. And 2 guys that I really like to see up there as well. Easy to make lineups, maybe some unique lineups. But then those kickers are right there in the next tier. You can play these kickers tonight, even both of them, and feel confident in your Super Draft lineups because of their really nice multipliers. Again, promo code SAL and get you that bonus. Be sure to check out the presenting sponsor of the show, Super Draft, and be able to take advantage of a better site to get your return on investment, your Dollarooskies for your brewskis or whatever else you want to use them on. We start to get down to some pretty shitty value and then some decent value. You get Mark Ingram here, who's operating as the running back 3 on his team now. Just 16 total touches in his last 3 games and only 9 total fantasy points over his last 3 games. Dobbins is getting all the touches in between the 20s and some in the red zone as well. Gus Edwards is getting some goal line work. Mark Ingram is just kind of getting some breather touches and some respect touches as being a veteran and a good locker room presence. He's played 29%, 8%, and 20% of the snaps in the last 3 games. And they were kind of giving him snaps last week when it was a blowout just to like kind of give him those like, you're a dusty old player, here's your snaps. Kind of sad to see, but he's a good locker room presence, and this is just what happens when you draft a very good running back earlier on. When you have Gus Edwards as a very strong, good yards per carry guy, and when you start to become inefficient and older, it's going to be tough. That's just the law of the land in the NFL. So Mark Ingram, no interest for me. Miles Boykin and Devin Duvernay, we could hit on both of these guys at the same time. Boykin at $2,200 and Duvernay at $1,600. Look, in week 13, you got a lot of things that are not going to be the case this week, so it's really hard to gauge that for their usage. Des Bryant was ruled out last second. No Willie Snead, no Mark Andrews. Miles Boykin came in and ran 19 routes. He only caught 1 of his 3 targets for a 38-yard touchdown, so he got you there if he ended up playing it. When he's going to be on the field tonight, when and if he's on the field tonight, he'll face some Mitchell, which would be a negative 18% matchup for Boykin. But if we look at Devin Duvernay for $600 less and a better super draft multiplier of 3x, look, he will have the same matchup as above if he does indeed play. And he saw last week, same exact stuff, same usage as Mr. Miles Boykin, 19 routes run, only saw 1 target and caught it for 2 yards. But in week 12, you saw Boykin play 33% of the snaps and Mr. Devin Duvernay, the rookie, play 87%. If I had to guess tonight, I would say that with Willie Snead back, with Mark Andrews back, neither of these guys are going to be all that impactful. In the passing game, they'll be 4th options at best. But I would say that Devin Duvernay is at least, even if they run the same amount of routes, I'll take the cheaper option there, right? $600 less, better super draft multiplier. But I'll say that Devin Duvernay is the better player. Maybe the nice touchdown catch last week got Miles Boykin some more credit and some more run, but I'll still say that Devin Duvernay plays more of the snaps. So I won't have interest in Miles Boykin. If you were to pick one of these guys, I would end up going to Devin Duvernay, who's below $2,000. But But if we're going to pick a value play at all, we already hinted at him earlier, it's going to be $1,000 David Njoku because, and this is if Austin Hooper does not play. He's unlikely and leaning doubtful to play tonight. Expected timeshare with Bryant, but in week 13, you saw 13 routes, which is a season high. Actually, a season high for David Njoku. He played 50+% of the snaps in the 2 weeks when Austin Hooper was also out. And in those weeks, you saw David Njoku put up in week 7 on 12 routes, 2 catches, 20 yards, and a touchdown on 3 targets, 10 fantasy points. And then the week after that, both of them struggled against Vegas, both Bryant and David Njoku. Njoku ran another 12 routes, right? At that point, it was a season high. Saw 3 more targets, caught his sole target for 19 yards, 2.9 fantasy points. I have him projected for around 4.5 fantasy points tonight. Very similar to what I have Bryant projected at. We'll take it at $1,000 for a guy who I think probably runs somewhere between 12 and 15 routes. I think Bryant probably runs somewhere between like 14 and 16, maybe a little bit more routes for Bryant, but nowhere near those extra 2 to 3 routes, or is it worth a $3,000 difference? Close out the slate with guys who I don't have any interest in. Luke Wilson, now that you have all these guys back, especially Mark Andrews, I'm not going to have any interest in Luke Wilson. At this point, he has not been great, and now he's questionable. He might not even play tonight, which means that they're going to have to get somebody from the practice squad, if it's Eric Tomlinson or somebody else for Baltimore, if Luke Wilson doesn't go. In week 13, he played 57% of the snaps, saw 1 target on 16 routes. Not interested in him. And then Marvin Hall is at least interesting to point out. I don't know if he gets any run tonight. He was just signed on Monday. He's going to be cleared and able to play as the wide receiver 4 for this team. They don't have any more Kadarius Hodge, or at least not for right now. So Marvin Hall they signed, who just got dumped by Detroit, who's been a decent player this year. It's likely going to be low usage though, as he'll be the wide receiver 4. I can't see them playing him over the rookie Donovan Peoples-Jones, especially after Jones just set himself career as a rookie, career and season highs in routes run, in yardage, all this other stuff, right? So I don't think that Marvin Hall is going to be in play, but he's $200. So if he is active, he's at least somebody to look at if you're playing like a Millie Maker and you really want to be taking his stance. At least worth mentioning that he's going to be in play tonight, but probably not going to be getting on the field all that much. So that is the $1 Million Rooski Showdown Slate breakdown for you. I hope you all enjoyed it. If this is your first time here, let me know in the comments section. Like, subscribe, do all those things. I appreciate the support. If you want to support even more over on Patreon, you get a shit ton of stuff over on Patreon because I'm just my own guy, right? I'm my own little one-man business here. I don't have to charge the $200 a month in these crazy fucking prices that I have seen them charge, and I'm assuming even more charge higher than that in some spots. But since I'm just one man, I don't got to play employees. I don't have all this much overhead or this office space or anything like that. Just me. So if you want to sign up for that, you're going to get better analysis for a much cheaper and probably industry low price point right now. So you can check that stuff out. As well, you can just follow along with projections and rankings. Link down below on my Patreon, patreon.com/Sal_Vetri_. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, everybody. I appreciate you all a ton in advance, and I will see you at 6 p.m. East Coast time if you're willing and able. So hit that notification and like button for the live stream where I'll answer your questions. Yes, you people out there right now. That's the one spot where I will be answering your questions on this slate, 6 p.m. East Coast time. See you all then. Best of luck, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. We will reconnect later on today.